Welcome everybody to this special talk tonight with some powerful guests talking about the issue of the pandemic of police brutality here, given the murder, the cold-blooded murder of our dear brother George Floyd in Minneapolis a couple of weeks ago. Our goal tonight is with our panel of speakers that are familiar with this, that have been struggling in the street. They've been victims whose family have been victim by police brutality here. We're going to talk about what we're seeing, the lens of what the vicious legacy of white supremacy that we're seeing that's informing these actions that we're seeing all around the country here of the targeting, the systematic targeting of our Black brothers, the people of color and poor and the working class in general here, and talk a little bit about the end of where we move forward from here, where we go here in reforming and changing and overturning and defunding. We'll just go out and say defunding the police departments here across the country that are the authors of so much pain and suffering here, and that we know that is the working class, and that us in the communities can do what they're doing and better, and without the killing and without the mayhem. So with that, I'm Cristobal Cavazos from the group Immigrant Solidarity DuPage, and just outside of Chicago in DuPage. We are joined tonight by our dear brother Sammy Feliz, who is the brother of a victim of a police killing in New York City. And we remember Alan Feliz was slain by police, and we're going to be hearing from our dear brother. We're joined by Pam Africa from the movement CORE tonight, the movement that was a legendary movement in the Black community here that has a story of a history of struggling against police brutality and police oppression in Philadelphia and beyond. We have Carlito Ravira from the Young Lords. It's a pleasure to be with Carlito, who has done so much in his career within an organization that has done so much struggling here and has brought so much unity to our community here across in Chicago and in the East Coast here, the Young Lords, and we're going to be hearing from our dear brother. And as well, we're joined by Jabira M, who is an activist from Minneapolis, who's been in the scene of the action here in this protest and the struggle against police brutality in the wake of the killing of George Floyd here, and hearing a little bit about firsthand what's happening here. So with that, we're going to start off with Sammy Feliz and his what is going on? What are we seeing, Sammy Feliz, in this moment in United States history in 2020 in the month of June?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's an uproar. It's a nation that's tired of being abused and mistreated, unjustly treated, and it's pretty much the country is over the treatment that's going on. And what's going on is that the country is coming together, no matter the color, the race, or the sex. Everyone is coming together, and we're showing our strength and unity. And when we do that, we cause changes throughout all phases of the government. And it's truly remarkable to see communities come together, show out, and show love for those who have fallen to police brutality or social injustices. And it's remarkable. And I'm proud of our nation, and hopefully we can succeed our overall goal, so that way the country and this nation and our communities are ran the right way, and we're no longer being affected by police brutalities and these social injustices, racism, bigotry, everything that the agenda before that has already been set out before us. So it's time for a change. The people want change, and I don't think it's going to stop until we obtain our goal, and that is to change the policing in our country and how the system is ran.
Good deal. Thank you, my dear brother. Pam, you're from the movement CORE. You guys have had a history of struggling against police brutality going into Philadelphia. I'm sure you have so much to tell. This is nothing new, is it? We caught this on screen. We caught this on video because of iPhones, and now they're really shedding a lot of light in the darkness. But this is really nothing new, what we're seeing. What are we seeing right now, Pam?
Well, what we're seeing right now, and we got to hold on to the fire. And this is a movement, an uproar like, never before. And, that it's lasting as long as it has. And but the pitfalls and things that I see is that when we call for just the police defunding of the police? What about the DA who allows the police to get off? What about the judge that sanctioned? I'm saying, I want it all. I want an end to all these, people that sit in positions. Cops do what they do behind the fact that they can get away with it because the DAs that charge them and or not really charge them, play around with them. The only reason why the cop that kicked off this event, this magnificent uprising is in jail is because of the people uprising. And but what we got to watch out for is politicians with power tricks, and I see them still right here again. And they're not talking about these judges or the DA. The DA who sanctioned that murder by not arresting. It's like, he's in and out. Like the DA who brought the cops that beat my brother Delbert Africa, unmercifully on August 8, 1978, before the whole world that played in airports around the world. When it got to court, we had to force them to arrest them. And when it got to court, they selected juries from outside the city because they were saying that the cops could not get a fair trial. When the jury looked and heard, because these were people, when they looked and heard what was happening, the judge looked and saw that they were going to lock these cops up. And what he did, he said, I'm going to be the lightning bolt. I'm going to dismiss the jury. And I'm going to set the cops free because they have suffered enough. The judge in the case where they dropped a bomb, killing 11 men, women, and children, and my sister Ramona filed a federal suit against them. These cops were found liable for murder. The jury that they selected came up with a $1 a month. And it was 11 people that was murdered. And on each of the cops that was indicted and found guilty, they would bring $1 a month for 11 years. That was the sentence for the death of 11 black men, women, and children. And hold up, if that's not bad enough, the judge 3 days later called everybody back, and he said that is cruel and unusual punishment. These cops had suffered enough. I'm saying right then we should have broke these mother suckers' backs, and because how can we sit by and allow politicians to run rampant? We got to deal with the issue of the DAs and the judges, as while we holler, for funding to be defunded from the police, and all the conspirators got to go.
Pam, thank you for that. Pam is referring, is some of us might know, in 1985 in Philadelphia, the police dropped a bomb on a house in a residential neighborhood, a bomb on civilians within their own country, which is if you could imagine just the racism and the systemic abuse and the institutional race and the classism going into that. I mean, that is just our dear sister Pam here testifying, but we see that this is nothing new, and in fact, it's really something that's just continuing through. But the shining the light on this by the movement here, we really have a lot to do. So with that, we're going to turn to Carlito from the Young Lords. Tell us, Carlito, what are we seeing right now? And tell us a little bit about your work, my friend. Carlito, are you there? Carlito, you're muted. No te escucho.
Can you hear me now?
There you go, Carlito. Carlito from the Young Lords. What are we seeing, Carlito? Well, tell us a little bit about your work, man.
Well, first and foremost, the Young Lords do not exist today. The Young Lords were destroyed in the 1970s by Operation COINTELPRO. However, I am still a Young Lord today, and I will take being a Young Lord to the grave. I continue living by the 13-point program. What I do today is I co-host La Voz Latina on WBAI-FM here in New York, and I use the radio show to promote and to talk about these pigs. Okay, But going to the theme of this meeting, the police have to be disarmed. They have to be disarmed and they have to be abolished. Because basically, as long as this system exists, police brutality is going to continue. What's happening right now is that something was festering. And thanks to the Trump administration, who is an open fascist, he ignited something that was, in the undertones of American society in all realms, in the Black community, in the Latino community, everywhere, because he did not hide anything. I mean, it goes, to the demonstration in Charleston, where he, with the KKK and the Nazis, he was giving them credence. Okay, it goes to his initial entry into his presidency, when he called Mexicans, lowlifes, okay, rapists, etc. He made his declarations very clear, and what we are seeing today, 4 years later, is a culmination of what has happened prior to this event with George Floyd. What George Floyd was, it was a trigger, okay, to something that was already in the works. Now, that is not to say that it originated with Donald Trump, okay, because there have been abuses, accelerating in the last 2 or 3 or 4 previous presidencies. Or Barack Obama was no saint. He was not walking around with a halo. No president has ever deported more people than Barack Obama. And let's not forget that the manifesto of mass incarceration is the work of the Obama-Biden administration. Okay, it was that administration that heightened the crisis of mass incarceration. So when Trump came in, there was an already set scenario waiting for him to take it to the next level. So when we talk about ending police brutality, this is not a question of Democrat versus Republican, because that is the poison, the sweet smelling poison that they are trying to diffuse this upsurge with. That if we elect Biden into office, that we're gonna get justice all of a sudden. So I got news for y'all. Biden is not for defunding the police. He made that vividly clear yesterday. So what we are about to see, we're about to see a position by the two, the two bourgeois parties. They're going to work in unison to keep control and stabilize the situation. One is going to give you the harsh tasting poison, and the other one is going to give you the sweet tasting poison. But their ultimate aim is to salvage a very unpleasant situation for the ruling class right now.
Well said, man. Well said. And we know, thinking about the institution of the police, that goes all the way back to slave patrols, all the way back in this country to the slave patrol here.
And that is the reason why they have to be abolished. But in order for that to happen, we have to take away the potential of being blinded by the Democratic Party. And because let's not forget who the Democratic Party is. That was the party of slave owners. And they are going to try and prettify the whole solution, and let's not forget that police brutality is a question of wealth. They don't do what they do in affluent white communities. They go to Black and Latino communities to unleash their sadistic policies.
Good deal. Thank you, my dear brother. With that, let's go to Jabari, who's been and the streets of Minneapolis, we're right in the heart of where this is shooting out right now, where this movement was born, where the outrage first fired up for the first time. Chibari, what are we seeing on the streets of Minnesota, in Minneapolis there right now, in the wake of the brutal police murder of George Floyd?
Thank you. Currently, what we're seeing on the streets here in Minneapolis is that we're sick of being martyrs, and no longer is there time for martyrs now. We are taking our direct demands to the streets because that is where real change happens. And that is where we have seen time and time again, it's not going to happen in the halls of Congress. Because like Carlito said, that is where movements go to die. And so right now, it's a multiracial rebellion that has taken place, but it's mostly led by Black, Brown, and Indigenous youth. And it's a beautiful thing to see here. And I'm very proud of my comrades here in Minneapolis for doing the work on the ground. I just think the police have been truly the instigators of violence. The days before the 3rd precinct fell, we were airing our grievances, okay? Yet we were met, and my friends and I were met with rubber bullets and tear gas for saying, no more, we're sick of it. And so it created the opportunity for destruction and rebellion, which was righteous, truly, because we are disrupting the system that values property over our lives. And I think that's something that's very important to recognize. And we're also seeing beautiful amounts of mutual aid amongst our communities. There's hardly a block you can go on without seeing tents just full of supplies for the neighborhood. What used to be the Target is now, a community grocery store, and many businesses have been turning to then redistribute what they have towards the community, because I think we've seen a shift, I think, in the consciousness, even among, the business class, and at least, the business class of people who are in Minnesota who also identify with this movement. Now, I will say that it's mobilization, but organization is another thing. And I think we have still yet to see that kind of take shape and take form, and we'll see what form that takes.
Good deal. Good deal. Thank you very much, Jabari. Sammy, going back to you, our dear brother, Sammy Feliz. It's been said, I think, with the Obama administration, kind of like Carlito was alluding to, that we're in the age of a colorblind society. Everyone's got the same shot, the same deal, the same opportunity here to get ahead. This is a myth we've been told over and over again, when the reality is we're seeing 1/3 or 40% of Black and brown children living in poverty. Here in Chicago, we're a half hour away from Chicago, the West Side and the South Side, conditions of third world countries or even worse. These are all majority African-American people living in these towns. And the North Side of Chicago, one of the richest parts of the country, is almost completely white. There's this attempt here to say, everything. It's colorblind, we're all equal, everyone's got the same shot, everyone's got the same deal. Sammy Feliz, your brother was killed by police. Why was he targeted? And what happened with your dear brother? And may he rest in peace.
Thank you so much. And once again, I appreciate the platform to share his story, because I feel like it is important to share stories like these of voices that do go silent. And it isn't because lack of attention on the family side or lack of commitment for the movement, but the media trying to sweep this information under the rug by dehumanizing the individual, or just sheerly not covering the story because of lack of attention or not wanting to be risque with the information that they're putting out there or frighten their society. On October 17th of 2019, it was a regular day. Around 3 p.m., my brother left a friend's house. As he drove off from the friend's house, there was a marked police cruiser that was going in the opposite direction. As they crossed paths, the officer, so he claims in his story, is that he saw my brother with no seatbelt on and then proceeded to turn his vehicle around and pull them over because he was with a passenger. That to me was a clear indication of racial profiling, because when the officer approached the vehicle, and this is caught on body cam, and I implore everyone to go visit YouTube. It's on there under Alan Feliz. The officer then acknowledges that his body cam was on, or that his seatbelt was on at that time. He continues, instead of just dropping it from there, noticing that he was wrong because it was a black shirt on a black seatbelt, he continued to search, asked for his driver's license that he handed over. At that time, it was my driver's license that he handed over. An outstanding warrant for littering came out, and he proceeded to tell his fellow officer that my brother popped, which is lingo for that there was a warrant out and that this person must be placed in cuffs. They didn't do that. He proceeded to hand something over to his partner and asked my brother to check the vehicle to ensure that it was in park. As my brother walks back to the vehicle, he isn't fleeing, he isn't running for his life, or he isn't trying to escape. He calmly sits back in the vehicle, and a hail of punches from Officer Barrett, which is on the driver's side of my brother, is ensuing on him. The officer who actually kills my brother, which is Officer Rivera, he comes in from the passenger side, jumps on the passenger, tases my brother twice. Then the entire interaction is telling him, I'm gonna fucking shoot you. I'm gonna fucking shoot you. And I apologize for my language, but this is how they treat us. And then body cam just disappears, and you'll see that, and shoots one fatal shot in the chest and kills my brother. They then drag him pantsless out of the vehicle and expose him at 3 o'clock as kids are walking home from school in the middle of the street, and they expose him pantsless in the middle of the street and still proceed to put cuffs on him as he's taking his last gulps of air and blood, which is a traumatic vision, which is engraved in my brain and embedded. And all of this is happening on Bainbridge Avenue on the Bronx, which is half a block away from Montefiore Hospital. So the shoot to kill mentality within the NYPD and the entire force nationwide is shoot to kill. And that's something that we have to remove from the policing, because they're killing innocent lives for something as minimal as a littering ticket that could have been easily solved with a disappearance. And it's heartbreaking that this is the society that we currently live in. And what I urge is for us to remain together, so that way this movement can carry on and we can change the way that society is being ran, so this thing doesn't happen anymore. And I apologize that I went over.
Thank you so much for that. That's powerful. Powerful. Pam Africa, the call for Black Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter too. It can't be understood without examining the vicious legacy of white supremacy. The whole 200, 300-year history, going back to the slave trips and the slave ships coming in and the auction boards, and going back to this nasty and vicious history here. Pam Africa, can you tell us a bit about the legacy here of the Black Lives Matter, the legacy of the white supremacy that's informing these actions of what happened to our dear brother here and what happened to George Floyd? Pam, are you there?
Oh, yes, I had muted as well, too. I'm sorry.
Okay.
So, I need to get the question again. I'm sorry.
So, Pam, what I'm saying is as far as the Black Lives Matter movement that's blooming, that's been shooting up for years now, we really can't understand why Black Lives Matter, especially if we don't understand the vicious legacy of white supremacy, if we don't understand the history of the United States here and its treatment of the Black, its failure in its treatment of our Black, of African American, the people of descent, of African descent here in this country, the failure to give jobs. Can you talk about the vicious legacy of white supremacy informing these acts of violence and police murders in George Floyd and the murder of our dear brother here?
Right. You know, historically, Black lives have never mattered, and they don't matter today. And you know, there's this voice and this movement that has risen up. And the only reason why we guys to say Black lives matter is because they don't matter to this system. It don't matter to the police. It doesn't matter to the DAs and the judges. And whatever title is they gave people from the shores, or when they snatched out people and brought them over here, when they invaded and, you know, raped and robbed throughout every community, every country of color, and no lives of color matter to white supremacy. And, you know, we just have to continue to fight it as much as we can, and because, you know, you got to fight it till your toe, you have a toe tag on your foot, and because these people will consistently do the same thing over and over and over again. And again, I point out to the fact that, you know, when DAs is allowed to get away with what it is that they get away with, and the judges allowed to get away with what they get away with, and you know, we're never going to have injustice. And because these people are placed there by, you know, the corporations protecting the things that, you know, they view as our air, our water, our soil. I'm saying, you know, the mere fact that, you know, this epidemic right here and this COVID-19 takes a lot of the more Black people than anyone else, and you know, people of color, and you know, that's that racism. And I'm saying it's all tied in to the two murders that you talked about, and you know, but we're not taught to see that, and you know. This movement is a magnificent one because you have environmentalists, you have people that's dealing with police brutality, you're dealing with, you know, the whole, you know, I go along with everybody about the Democrat. The Democrat, like Malcolm said, is no different than a Republican, and that seems, and the only way that 45 sits where he sits is because the Democrats and Republicans are one. And until we break that white supremacist thing, you know, there, like my brother was saying, good cop, bad cop. And, you know, we're not getting it. And, you know, yes, we are, you know, because this movement rose way above Democrats. It rose way above anything, you know. But what I'm watching these people who mean us no good, and, you know, and I'm not talking about the street people and that, you know, rose up to rebel against all that's wrong. I'm watching people and entertainers and, you know, and I appreciate those that speak out, and but a lot of people train it. It's like cattle when they break out of the corral and they, you know, stampeding and they get in the way and they taking everything down in the side, and then comes the cowboy, the maverick, who runs alongside them and run right on back into the corral that they escaped from. And you know, this is what, you know, I'm hoping I'm not seeing again, because I've seen it. I've been involved in the movement since, you know, the early 70s. And I wasn't involved in any movement until I saw what happened to me. And that made me take my apron off from the kitchen and throw it down. And I became one of the baddest ass revolutionaries that's there, because I saw, I was a part of, you know, and like this right here, this movement right here, and you know, it's going to take all of us, and you know, to keep it together. and to educate people who are speaking from their heart and don't understand, the full ramification of, being led by something that has never ever been true to us. And I'm talking about that Democratic Party, the one that produced an Obama who shipped more people, back to their countries despite the fact that he knew these black lives were going to be killed. The mere fact that this monster sat with these other monsters and was a part of the murder of Gaddafi right now over there, brothers and sisters and black babies are being tortured, and there's nothing being said to that. Do Black Lives Matter? I'm saying this is a movement that started. It's a movement that got to be educated about all the wrongs that are happening here. How we, as people, sit and hold hands with the oppressor. Black Lives Matter. You got to think about Libya. You got to think about Puerto Rico. You got to think about Africa. All Black Lives Matter. What's happening over in Palestine. As we speak, babies a bit. That chokehold came from Israel, as what I'm told. It's something that goes on over there at a daily basis in here. Our voices, and I see in this movement voices that are lifted up about all of it. And I think voices like I hear today that articulate. I'm so glad that Carlito have a radio station now, because he's a great educator, and and the other voices here. It is our job through the experience that we have, to be a part of educating these people and stirring them away from the corral that we have, from every uprising that there has been, who forced us back into the corral. I'm saying I'm not going back in the goddamn corral. I'm going to stand and fight on the upside. The Mavericks, we must take it down. And the bosses that sent the Mavericks out. Yes, about, the police, but the people that uphold them is what we got to do. If they got rid of 45 today, if they got rid of him, Trump today, he has already set in policy all these killing judges, if he's drop dead today or tomorrow, Pence will take his place, and all that, the murders that he put in place, we got to take it all the way across the board. We need to get, when we talk about getting rid of Trump and ending police brutality, right here in Philadelphia, they took the Rizzo statue down. When they took that Rizzo statue down, this was a man who compared himself to Attila the Hun, who killed many black men, women, and children, caused the August 8th confrontation here. They took the statue down, but that mentality lives. We're going to demonstrate where they took the statue down to make people understand that, yeah, that's a good thing you took it down, but that mentality has got to go too.
Thank you very much, Pam. Thank you very much. Carlito, I wanted to talk to you. It's been coming out here in Chicago in a lot of the protests. If there was equality, there would be no need for police. We've lived the vast majority of human history without any police at all. The police are intimately, intrinsically tied with capitalism. Talk to us a bit about the relationship between what we're seeing, the police brutality, and the vicious legacy of capitalism and the symptoms of this deeper capitalist crisis.
Well, the police was first created in Europe, and it was to protect the infrastructure of commerce. In the United States, the more lucrative that slavery, African slavery became, they found a need to have a force, a professional force that maintained the infrastructure of slavery. They became the slave catchers, and they became the patrols, because they had to patrol the the areas where these plantations were at, okay? That, you know, human beings develop ideas based on their reality, on their surroundings. And the slave catchers developed a reality towards Black people, even though, because many of them were Scottish and Irish, even though the British had enslaved the Irish people. Okay, many of the technical, the torturous forms that were used on Black people were first experimented with in Ireland. Okay, and so there is no excuse for Irish people to come over here and become overseers. You would think so, theoretically, but you know, it is the legacy of oppressors to pit one oppressed group against another. And so many of the patrols, those plantation patrols, were Irishmen, and so after the Civil War, many of these plantation patrols were without jobs, but they were adept to incarceration and apprehension. And so the first police departments that were created in cities like New York and Baltimore and Boston, that's who they hired, and to create the police. You know, now you would think that it's a new profession. No, because with it, they inherit the ideas that previously were required to carry out the functions of slave catchings. So the attitude that the slave catchers had towards Black people, it was passed on to the modern day police department. You know, so then you wonder, why is it that they have such a tradition of killing Black people? Well, it's rooted in African chattel slavery. And so when we look at the police, you know, because they have a police in Cuba, and I sure damn support the Cuban Revolution. It's a different kind of police, okay? Number one, the police in Cuba is subject to recall. Every individual cop is subject to recall by the community from which they serve. Number two, in order for them to become police officers in those communities, they have to meet the approval of that community. Number three, every year they are subject to evaluation. Number four, they are unarmed when they are doing the beat walk in the community. The only time that you see them packing weapons on them is at moments of crisis, such as when the right wing was putting bombs in the hotels during the special period. That's when the police started arming themselves. They are professional. They are the equivalent to professional soldiers, but they come from the people, and they are trained politically to be conscious of the community from which they serve. And that is enforced. That is enforced with community control of the police. If you notice, I'm not going around advocating defunding the police. What the fuck is that? Okay? I am for community control of the police, because when you have community control of the police, the people have complete control on who gets defunded and who goes to jail. The people do not have that power right now, and that is the problem.
Thank you very much, Carlito. Thank you. That was powerful, man. All right, turning to Jabari, we're analyzing a little bit the situation. I lived in Minneapolis a little bit, and the diversity, the power. There's a powerful Black community there. There's a big Latino community there. Seeing these white officers, this Asian officer there, all watching this man, the officer Chauvin, choking, just strangling our dear brother George Floyd to death. What is happening here? What is the legacy here in the city of Minneapolis of white supremacy that a white police officer could feel, even with the community police board? I know that there's one that there's a lot of steps that have been taken in a pretty liberal city. You know, it's a pretty democratic liberal city. What happened there? What happened, and what's the deeper thing below the surface here in that city?
Yeah, I think it was truly a lack of, I think it was inhumanity, because when you give someone who doesn't live in our cities a badge, you give them total impunity, you give them control over life and death. And through racial capitalism, the victims are going to be not viewed as human, right? I don't think that George Floyd was viewed as a human to Derek Chauvin, because if you watch that video, I don't think there is any way that you could see a respect for another human life there. And the majority of the police force of Minneapolis do not actually live in the communities that they police, which I'm pretty sure is the case for most of the police force in the rest of the country. Yeah, we have a major diverse population, though it's totally stratified. I mean, the amount of inequality in Minneapolis and in Minnesota in general is certainly higher than most other states. It's just, I think, overlooked. And so I think right now we are challenging, the city council to utter words that I feel like they probably never expected to utter, which was, defund the police. Now, I believe in police abolition. I think defund was a compromise that was created. And even that's not far enough, because as long as, we don't get to choose who represents, the force that's supposed to serve and protect in our communities, there is no way that we will see fair treatment and justice. And I don't think that is a thing that has ever truly existed in this country, and especially not in Minnesota.
There's an old saying that the poorer you are, the more laws you tend to break, because the system has been designed that way, and you see that in Minneapolis, you see that in these liberal cities, where the poor, and particularly the Black poor, where you get it triply hard, are targeted, like our dear brother, George Floyd. Thank you for that testimony. Going back to Sammy Feliz, moving forward here, a plan of action. I think a lot of people here in Chicagoland, we've had a lot of protests. Every single day there's been protests all across the city of Chicago, the suburbs here. And I think what we're really trying to catch right now is some kind of a coherent platform, a coherent platform of transformation. I liked what Carlito was talking about in his reference to Cuba, the community policing there. These are stuff we really have to be talking about big time, talking about where we go on from here, how we transform. And we have the public outrage here, and it's time to talk about a coherent platform, a coherent people's platform here to totally turn the system upside down as far as police are concerned. Let's start off with you, Sammy. What are your thoughts here in moving forward, in empowering the people on the streets and preventing police terror in our communities? Okay, let's take that, Sammy. I realize that Sammy is off the call. Let's take that then to the same question to Pam Africa. Where, as I mentioned, we're looking for at this time in this movement where the first part is being the outrage, the indignation. I think the second phase that we're starting to enter to is talking about some of these ideas like Carlito is talking, what Jabire was talking, a coherent platform, seeing beyond what's on the table. I was at a protest last week where a Democratic politician was booed off the stage. A police chief, an African-American police chief, booed off the stage. I mean, we're going far beyond token representatives here and going into deep systemic change that people are calling for. Pam Africa, who better than you what is a potential platform for transformation and protecting us from police brutality? What is this starting to look like in our communities? Pam, are you on the call? All right, so Pam is off. Carlito, let's take that same to you, my dear brother. What are your thoughts on moving forward here and a plan of action here for us in Chicago, in Minnesota, in New York, and all across the country?
Well, the way I see it, there's no blueprint. This is relatively very new. 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we never thought that we were going to have an outburst the way we are having one now. We're still trying to absorb and make sense of what's happening. There are aspects in the objective realm of this phenomenon that we really do not understand. This is not a carbon copy of what occurred 50 years ago. This is a totally new phenomenon, and I'll tell you why. I have never in my lifetime seen white people respond the way they have to the killing of a black man. You would see that in the 60s in the black community across the country, but not amongst whites. Right now, as we're having this meeting, there was a police station in Seattle that was taken over by protesters. A police station in Seattle. And the demonstrators have created a buffer zone in a radius of five blocks. And when we finish here, I urge you to go check it out. My point is that this thing is not over. It's going to intensify more. What is it that we have to do? What is our line of march? Well, right now we have an obstacle, and that obstacle is the November elections. It is not a favorable factor. It is a very unfavorable factor for the people's struggle, for the mass movement. And the reason why I say that is because traditionally, every 4 years of the presidential elections becomes the height of the hypnotic spell of bourgeois ideology. And we are going to see the application of that, but in a different form, simply because this presidential election is taking place under a political crisis. Now you ask me, what is our line of march? Our line of march has to be that this presidential election does not become the antidote to this momentum. Because as sure as hell, there are all kinds of indications that the ruling class is going to use the elections as the antidote to calm the situation down. You know, and I believe that if we can sustain the ideological onslaught that they're about to throw on us with the elections, then I can say that a lot of things are going to define themselves, you know. But it's too soon for anyone to come out with a crystal clear plan. It would be crazy, and more importantly, it would be suicidal for us to be rigid and say that this is the path that we got to go. The only thing that I can see right now is November's elections and how that is going to be weaponized against us. Trump already expressed that he's weaponizing it with his position that there should not be any mail-in ballots. As insignificant as that may sound, that outburst may sound, it is very significant, because it's a sound in the wind that the ruling class will use the elections as a way to either agitate the right, the white racist community in this country, or to pacify the sectors expressed and led by the oppressed.
Carlito, you make a profound point, and I think it's the movements that have made history in this country and all across the world. It's the movement. It's not been the president. Even our dear brother Howard Zinn said it's not who's sitting down in the Oval Office. It's who's sitting down on strike in the factories. It's who's paralyzing the cities. It's who's protesting, who's shutting down the industry. It's 1,000, 100,000 Black people on the streets. I mean, this is the course of history. And Carlito, what you say, the immigrant rights movement when we came out in 2006, absorbed into the Obama presidency and shut down. We see the 1960s, the civil rights movement absorbed into the Democratic Party and neutralized. We see the workers movement, the labor movement in the 30s, same thing, taken into
it hurts me.
Neutralized.
It hurts me to see former Black Panthers and former Young Lords who today are politicians, who today are mainstream newscasters. Okay, there is, the ruling class. The history of the ruling class is to, neutralize and pacify those that are most outspoken, and that is a phenomenon that's also going to take place in our present reality. The ruling class is not asleep. They are not on the side of the people. I don't give a shit how much they kneel. Whenever you see the racist leadership of the National Football League, apologizing for the position that they took, okay, that is like mind blowing. Okay, whenever you see police chiefs across the country kneeling, okay, that is mind blowing. And Confederate flags. Now the U.S. Navy and the military are banning Confederate flags. Okay, they are signing legislation of removing racist statues. Okay, those are concessions. They are on the retreat politically and psychologically, because they know better than we do. They know the potential that this situation has to elevate to a revolutionary crisis. And that we should feel good about, because what it reveals the weaknesses of the ruling class. Because our weaknesses are not the only ones that are manifesting. The weaknesses of the ruling class are out there right now. And that we can feel good about.
Yeah, good deal. Good deal. We got to turn these symbolic concessions into substantive concessions. Yeah, and that's gonna woman, my dear brother. Let's go back to you, Jabari. Minneapolis is a town of beautiful united fronts. I mean, you have a legacy of the labor movement back there, a legacy of the immigrant rights movement there. You have so much power, that's been built up in that city, in the united front. What ways forward do you see in your own city in Minneapolis, as far as ending police brutality, as far as community policing, as our dear brother Carlito's talking about, as far as getting these racist, purging these police officers, these police departments of racism, of arrogance, of hate, of class hate? What do you see, my dear brother Jabari, as ways forward that both for Minneapolis and us here in Chicago and across the country?
Yeah, I think the way forward is going to be now in the hands possibly of labor. I think that there needs to be organized strikes and solidarity. I think one of the main demands right now is for the more powerful unions like the AFL-CIO to kick, police unions off of their roster, because I know they get a lot of money But, you know, who do the bosses call when the workers strike? You know, they call the police. And I think that would truly go to the heart of their power as well. I think in a community situation right now, we're all learning what we can do. We are stopping our neighbors from turning themselves into vigilantes as we, you know, move our way forward through this. We're learning self-defense. We're learning to look out for one another and imagine a future, you know, where we won't call the cops, you know, for a situation, and we'll rely on each other. And that truly goes to the heart, and that truly breaks down the power that the police has over us and in our cities. You know, when we turn to each other with solidarity, you know, it just, their power truly crumbles. And, you know, we say, we refuse to live like this. We refuse to live under the boot, not only of capital, but of their, of capital's dogs, you know, the police force. Yep, I think that's the way forward.
Thank you very much, my dear brother. I think with that, we could take some questions here, Nick, if there's some questions out there for us, for Carlito and for Jabari here.
Sure, we have a question. What can united fronts in the history of struggle tell us about how to orient to this political moment of social unrest? We had a question asking how people can educate themselves and empower themselves in this moment to face these issues. And we have a great comment here. It says, it seems to me that the American people have two choices, revolution or go home and vote for Biden.
Why don't we take up the United Front first? Carlito, I'd like to hear from you. I know there's been a lot of, you know, we're an immigrant organization. Most of us in the group are Mexican. There's been a lot of attempts, I feel, to separate us from our African-American brothers and sisters. You know, what about us? You know, what about our issues here? While at the same time, our group in Pilsen, in the Mexican neighborhood in Chicago, there was a mass solidarity march for George Floyd. Keeping that united front has been, I think it's gonna be crucial right now in this in time, the Latino and the Black unity here. Carlito, speak to us a little bit about the united front and what how these could be used, how we could use them more moving forward.
Well, you know, I'll give it to you from the gut. Latino oppression it's really a stem of Black oppression, because Black oppression defined what anti-Latino, anti-Asian, anti-everything was going to be. You know, the experiences of the 1960s, the Rainbow Coalition, a coalition that the Black Panther Party created, that included the Young Lords, included the Mexican American group, the Brown Berets, the Asian American group, the Iwakun, and the poor white organization called the Young Patriots. There was a reason once that coalition was created, and once Fred Hampton envisioned that coalition turning into one entity, one fighting entity. There's a reason why Fred Hampton was assassinated 2 weeks later, after he made that announcement. And that was because it sent chills to the spines of the ruling class in this country. United Front, the United Front of the oppressed and exploited, is the biggest nightmare historically of the ruling class. Just look at the fact that they could not penetrate Andrew Jackson's army could not penetrate Florida because escaped slaves and the Seminoles, Indians, united. Look at the casualties that the slavers, once they started taking over the Mexican lands, they did not envision for the Mexican army to include African Americans who had escaped into Mexico. And they found that out of necessity, they had to also fight on the side of the Mexican people. These are stories that are kept out of, from our knowledge. The history of united fronts. Look at the united fronts of Native Americans. They formed united fronts to slow down the encroachment of white settlers. So if you look at the history of the oppressed throughout the world, but never mind, we don't have to go that far, right here in the United States. When Puerto Rico was invaded, who was it? Who were the first people to express contempt for the U.S. colonial invasions of Cuba, Guam, the Philippines, and Puerto Rico? It was the Black church. Okay, something that people don't know about. It was the Black church. The Black church, along with figures like Webb Du Bois, who were the most outspoken against the colonial wars of the United States. So if we are to, examine the necessity of united front, no one can tell it better than Black people, because they have always, out of necessity, been strove to create united fronts. I recall when I was a child in the late 1950s, somebody knocking at the door. My mother couldn't speak English, and there was these tall Black guys in suits selling a newspaper. It was the Nation of Islam. They were trying to communicate with us with their broken Spanish, and we were trying to respond with our broken English. That was beautiful. I made sense of it years later, and it had a tremendous impact on me. Okay? Nobody knows better than African Americans the value of the creation of united fronts. And that is something that every oppressed nationality, every freedom fighter of all the oppressed groups in this country have absorbed that lesson. There isn't one. Chicanos, Puerto Ricans, you name it. Native Americans, African Americans have always been there. Unless we don't even have to, no need to mention the struggles of labor. Some of the most militant labor struggles in the United States and successful labor struggles in the United States have had Black influence in them. The populist movement did not go anywhere until their racist asses started realizing out of necessity that they had to unite with the sharecroppers movement. And when they did, they excelled. So to talk about the need of united front, the necessity and the value of united front work, all you have to do is look at Black history, and it's verified there.
Thank you very much. You even think of going into Latin American history, the legacy of Haiti, they're
That's right.
Overthrowing the French colonialists and then going on and shining the light all over Latin America with the Black slaves in the United States, the Caribbean, Mexico. They're inspiring so much good.
The first guns that were brought to Puerto Rico in the 1868 revolution of El Grito de Lares were Haitian guns. Simón Bolívar had a regiment of Haitian fighters who came with their own weapons. Throughout Latin America, the Haitian Revolution was like the equivalent to the Soviet Union, what the Soviet Union was at one time, and it's a beacon, an inspiration to the world revolutionary movement. And that was Haiti.
Ahí está. Ahí está. Nick, let's take another question for our dear brother Jabari.
Well, I think we're getting kind of late on here. Let me see what we have. We still have that question about, you know, how can we better educate and empower ourselves in this moment where people are facing, you know, people are taking on these things like these autonomous zones and, you know, fighting back against the police.
Good deal. Good deal.
What new forms will look like.
Let's take that, Jabari. How could we educate and empower ourselves in this moment right now, this important moment in history that we're at right now, where it's really is going to take a taking of conscience here, you know, una toma de conciencia, as we say in Spanish. What do we do? How do we do this right now? How do we educate and empower ourselves in this moment, my dear brother?
Yeah, well, it's interesting to hear, you know, that this kind of movement, you know, our elders have never seen, though they did live through a lot of things. And so just reading, you know, accounts of the Black Panthers, the Young Lords, and those popular fronts, I think are truly going to be able to get us through this. I mean, you know, reading the CLR James account of the Haitian Revolution, reading just kind of revolutionary literature written by the people who lived it. You know, I think joining maybe an organization of like-minded comrades to focus on that kind of kind of movement, and then, you know, to be able to speak with people who've lived it and who have been there, you know, with the labor struggles and with the anti-racist struggles and, you know, struggles against fascism, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there is nothing like reading history and being a part of something like that. Especially if you're able to talk to the people who lived it. So that's what I would absolutely recommend. I think for our modern experience, at least we still see battles in the streets, you know. There are important books about street medics. I was saved by a street medic one night in Minneapolis. I think it's important to be able to, I mean, we're learning as well as we go. Some people have been able to program something that deprograms or blocks the LRADs, you know, the sonic devices that are employed by police stations to make protesters fall back. We're learning how, you know, to use gas, you know, against, you know, the police forces when they deployed against us, you know. And in these kind of movements, you learn as you go as well. So I think that's definitely important to be able to write down what's happening and continue to learn, as well as taking things from the past. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We've had a profound and a moving conversation tonight with our dear panelists, with our dear brother Sammy Feliz, with Pam Africa, with Carlito, and with Jabari here tonight, talking about this historic time that we're living right now, this that we've never extent of these protests that we've always seen in the Black community, but never quite extended to the white community like it's happening right now. We talked about the vicious legacy of white supremacy that's informing these actions, this arrogance and this hate that we saw on behalf of Chauvin and officers all around the United States that participate and feel above the law that they can kill innocent Black people, unarmed Black people with complete license, with any kind of restraint at all. We talked about moving forward and what it's going to take to get community control of policing. Carlito painted a beautiful picture of what our Cuban brothers and sisters are doing right there with the police force, where you have the community control, you have the police, the community approval of officers, you have the evaluation of these officers, and that most of the time they're unarmed. I think this is a noble goal here, having a board like this with hiring and firing power, something with real teeth here. And we know this isn't going to be conceded, as Frederick Douglass has said, power doesn't concede power, it only concedes it with a fight. And I think this is a noble aim right here. But again, we're learning as we go along. We've never seen anything quite to this magnitude here. And so everyone on the call tonight, everyone here, our dear brothers from Socialist Action tonight, Nick and everyone out there, Jeff Mackler and everyone on this call tonight, adelante. This was the pandemic of police brutality, our discussion tonight. And I thank everyone for listening, everyone for being on the call. Adelante.
Thanks for having us.